The First Amendment's commitment to religious freedom. The First Amendment to the United States Constitution embodies a profound commitment to religious freedom, a principle shaped by the historical context of religious persecution experienced by the framers. Ratified in 1791 as part of the Bill of Rights, the First Amendment's provisions are a cornerstone of American democracy, designed to safeguard individual rights to religious belief and practice while ensuring that government remains neutral in matters of religion. Historical context of religious persecution. The framers of the Constitution were acutely aware of the detrimental effects of religious persecution, drawing from their experiences and observations of religious intolerance in both Europe and colonial America. Many of the early settlers in the American colonies had fled religious persecution in Europe, seeking refuge where they could freely practice their faith. The Puritans, Quakers, Baptists, and other religious groups faced significant challenges in maintaining their beliefs and practices in environments often hostile to their doctrines. In England, the state church, the Anglican Church, exerted considerable control over religious life, and dissenters faced severe penalties. Similarly, in colonial America, while religious tolerance was often more flexible, there were still instances of persecution and discrimination against religious minorities. For example, the Massachusetts Bay Colony, founded by Puritans, was known for its strict religious orthodoxy and persecution of those who did not conform to its religious standards. These experiences deeply influenced the framers' understanding of the importance of religious freedom and the need for a clear separation between church and state. They sought to ensure that the new American government would not replicate the religious intolerance they had witnessed or experienced. The First Amendment's religious freedom clauses. The First Amendment's commitment to religious freedom is articulated through two key clauses: the Establishment Clause and the Free Exercise Clause. Together, these clauses enshrine the principles of religious neutrality and individual freedom of religious practice. The Establishment Clause. The Establishment Clause prohibits Congress from establishing an official religion or unduly favoring one religion over another. It reads, "Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion." This clause reflects the framers' desire to prevent any form of government-imposed religion and to ensure that religious institutions remain separate from governmental authority. The Establishment Clause has been the basis for numerous Supreme Court rulings aimed at maintaining this separation. For instance, in Engel v. Vitale, 1962, the court ruled that government-sponsored prayer in public schools violated the Establishment Clause, reinforcing the principle that government should not endorse or promote religious activities. Similarly, in Lemon v. Kurtzman, 1971, the court established the Lemon Test to evaluate whether government actions violate the Establishment Clause, focusing on ensuring that governmental support for religion neither advances nor inhibits religious practice. The Free Exercise Clause. The Free Exercise Clause guarantees individuals the right to practice their religion freely without interference from the government. It states, "Congress shall make no law prohibiting the free exercise of religion." This clause underscores the importance of allowing individuals to worship according to their beliefs and to practice their faith without fear of government retribution. The Free Exercise Clause has also been the subject of significant legal interpretation. In Sherbert v. Verner, 1963, the Supreme Court held that the government could not deny unemployment benefits to a woman who refused to work on her Sabbath, as doing so infringed on her religious beliefs. The court established that laws that burden religious practices must meet a strict scrutiny standard, demonstrating a compelling governmental interest and being the least restrictive means to achieve that interest. In Employment Division v. Smith, 1990, the court shifted its approach, ruling that neutral, generally applicable laws that incidentally affect religious practices do not violate the Free Exercise Clause. This decision led to calls for legislative reform, resulting in the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, RFRA, of 1993, which sought to restore more robust protection for religious practices, balancing religious freedom and governmental interests. The commitment to religious freedom as expressed in the First Amendment reflects a delicate balance between protecting individual rights and maintaining the integrity of government functions. This balance is evident in legal and societal debates surrounding religious accommodations, such as exemptions from certain laws for religious reasons. For example, questions arise regarding the extent to which religious organizations can be exempt from generally applicable laws, such as those pertaining to employment discrimination or health care mandates. The Supreme Court has had to navigate these issues, aiming to uphold religious freedoms while considering the impact on other societal interests and rights. #, modern implications and continuing challenges. In contemporary society, the principles embedded in the First Amendment's commitment to religious freedom continue to shape legal and political debates. Issues such as religious accommodations in the workplace, the rights of religious institutions, and the interplay between religious beliefs and public policy remain central to discussions about religious liberty. The ongoing challenge is to ensure that the First Amendment's protection of religious freedom remains robust while adapting to new contexts and societal changes. As diverse religious practices and beliefs continue to evolve, the commitment to ensuring that government does not favor or hinder any particular religious group remains a cornerstone of American democracy. #, conclusion. The First Amendment's commitment to religious freedom reflects the framers' intent to create a government that respects and protects individual rights to religious belief and practice. By establishing the principles of religious neutrality and free exercise, the amendment addresses the historical context of religious persecution and sets a foundation for safeguarding religious liberty in a diverse and democratic society. Balancing these principles with contemporary issues remains an ongoing challenge, but the core values enshrined in the First Amendment continue to guide and inform debates about religious freedom in the United States. The Establishment Clause, separation of church and state. The Establishment Clause of the First Amendment to the United States Constitution is a fundamental element of religious freedom, ensuring that government remains neutral in matters of religion. This clause, which states, "Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion," serves as a critical safeguard against the fusion of governmental and religious institutions. Its primary purpose is to uphold the principle of separation between church and state, a concept deeply embedded in American democratic values. Historical context. The Establishment Clause was a direct response to the religious conflicts and abuses of power that characterized Europe and colonial America. Many of the early American settlers had fled religious persecution in Europe, seeking a new land where they could practice their faith freely. The framers of the Constitution were keenly aware of the dangers posed by state-sponsored religion and sought to prevent the recurrence of such issues in the newly formed United States. In England, the Anglican Church was the official state church, and dissenters faced significant persecution. This experience, combined with the religious diversity observed in the American colonies, informed the framers' decision to include the Establishment Clause in the Bill of Rights. They sought to create a government that neither endorsed nor suppressed any religion, reflecting a commitment to both religious liberty and the avoidance of sectarian conflict. Interpretation and application. The interpretation of the Establishment Clause has evolved through various Supreme Court decisions, shaping the relationship between religion and government over time. The clause has been central to numerous landmark cases that have defined its scope and application. The Lemon Test. In Lemon v. Kurtzman, 1971, the Supreme Court established the Lemon Test to evaluate whether government actions violate the Establishment Clause. The test includes 3 criteria. 1. The government action must have a secular legislative purpose. 2. The primary effect of the action must neither advance nor inhibit religion. 3. The action must not result in excessive government entanglement with religion. The Lemon Test was applied in cases involving issues such as public funding for religious schools and government-sponsored religious activities. For example, in Lemon v. Kurtzman, the court ruled that state funding for religious schools was unconstitutional because it resulted in excessive entanglement between government and religion. Government endorsement and neutrality. Another key concept in the interpretation of the Establishment Clause is the idea of government endorsement of religion. In County of Allegheny v. ACLU, 1989, the Supreme Court held that government displays of religious symbols, such as a Christmas crèche in a courthouse, could violate the Establishment Clause if they were perceived as endorsing a particular religion. This decision reinforced the principle that government should avoid actions that could be seen as favoring or promoting religious beliefs. Similarly, in McCreary County v. ACLU, 2005, the court struck down displays of the Ten Commandments in public courthouses, ruling that the primary purpose of these displays was to promote a religious message, which violated the Establishment Clause. These decisions underscore the importance of maintaining government neutrality in matters of religion. Government actions and religion. The Establishment Clause affects various aspects of government policy and practice, from public education to legislative actions. Key issues include 1. Public school prayer. The Supreme Court has consistently ruled against school-sponsored prayer in public schools. In Engel v. Vitale, 1962, the court found that official school prayers, even if non-denominational, violate the Establishment Clause. This decision reinforced the idea that government involvement in religious practices in public schools is unconstitutional. 2. Religious displays and symbols. Government displays of religious symbols, such as crosses or nativity scenes, in public spaces have also been scrutinized under the Establishment Clause. The court has generally prohibited such displays if they are perceived as endorsing a particular religion or if they create an impression of government support for religious messages. 3. Funding for religious organizations. The use of public funds for religious organizations has been a contentious issue. The court has ruled that direct government funding to religious institutions, such as religious schools, is unconstitutional if it results in excessive entanglement between government and religion. However, in cases like Zelman v. Simmons-Harris, 2002, the court upheld voucher programs that allowed parents to use public funds for private, including religious, schools, provided the program was neutral and offered choices to parents. Balancing acts and ongoing debates. The application of the Establishment Clause often involves balancing government neutrality with the accommodation of religious practices. Issues such as religious exemptions from certain laws, the inclusion of religious symbols in public spaces, and the provision of services by faith-based organizations continue to spark debate and litigation. The principle of separation of church and state, as enshrined in the Establishment Clause, is fundamental to ensuring that government does not impose or endorse religious beliefs. However, navigating the line between neutrality and accommodation remains a complex and evolving challenge. The Supreme Court's interpretations and rulings on the Establishment Clause reflect an ongoing effort to uphold the values of religious freedom while addressing contemporary issues and maintaining a fair and impartial governmental framework. Conclusion. The Establishment Clause plays a crucial role in preserving the separation of church and state, a foundational principle of American democracy. By prohibiting government endorsement or support of any religion, the clause ensures that religious liberty is protected and that government remains neutral in matters of faith. Through landmark Supreme Court decisions and ongoing legal interpretations, the Establishment Clause continues to shape the relationship between religion and government, reflecting the enduring commitment to religious freedom and the prevention of sectarian influence in public life. Historical context. Freedom from religious tyranny. The Establishment Clause of the First Amendment, which forbids Congress from establishing a state religion, reflects a profound commitment to freedom of religion and the separation of church and state. This principle emerged from a deep-seated aversion to religious tyranny and intolerance, informed by the experiences of religious persecution in England and the American colonies. Understanding this historical context is crucial to grasping why the framers of the Constitution were so determined to enshrine religious freedom in the founding document. The English experience of religious tyranny. The history of religious conflict in England played a significant role in shaping the American founders' views on religious liberty. England's history was marked by a series of contentious struggles between different religious groups and the state, reflecting the broader European context of religious intolerance. State religion and persecution. During the Reformation, England saw the establishment of the Anglican Church under Henry VIII, which became the state religion. This created a religious monopoly that marginalized and persecuted those who did not conform to Anglican orthodoxy. Nonconformists, including Catholics, Puritans, and other dissenters, faced significant persecution. Under Elizabeth I and later monarchs, the Church of England wielded considerable power, enforcing religious conformity and punishing dissent. The penal laws against Catholics, the expulsion of Puritans, and the repression of other religious minorities exemplified the tyranny that state-imposed religion could inflict. The Glorious Revolution and Toleration. The Glorious Revolution of 1688, which resulted in the overthrow of James II and the ascension of William III and Mary II, marked a turning point in English religious policy. Although the revolution established the principle of parliamentary sovereignty and led to the Bill of Rights in 1689, which curtailed the power of the monarchy, religious toleration was limited. The Toleration Act of 1689 allowed some degree of religious freedom for dissenting Protestants, but it still maintained a privileged status for the Anglican Church and excluded Catholics and non-Christians from holding public office. Colonial America and religious intolerance. In the American colonies, religious intolerance manifested in various ways, reflecting both the influence of European practices and the unique conditions of colonial life. Persecution and establishment in the colonies. Colonial America was a patchwork of varying religious practices and levels of tolerance. Some colonies, like Massachusetts Bay, established state religions and enforced strict conformity. The Puritans, who sought religious freedom in the New World, imposed their own form of religious orthodoxy on the settlers. Dissenters, such as Baptists and Quakers, faced persecution, and harsh measures were taken against those who challenged the established order. For instance, the Massachusetts Bay Colony persecuted Quakers and executed several dissenters for their beliefs. Anne Hutchinson, a prominent figure who challenged Puritan orthodoxy, was banished for her religious views. Similarly, the Salem witch trials of 1692, fueled by religious hysteria, resulted in the execution of 20 people and the imprisonment of many others, illustrating the destructive potential of religious intolerance. Movements toward toleration. Despite these instances of intolerance, there were also movements toward religious freedom in colonial America. Pennsylvania, founded by William Penn, was notable for its commitment to religious liberty and tolerance. Penn, a Quaker, established a colony where individuals of all faiths could worship freely. Rhode Island, established by Roger Williams, also became a haven for religious dissenters. Williams, who had been expelled from Massachusetts Bay, championed the principle of separation of church and state, advocating for a government that did not interfere in religious matters. The framing of the Constitution. The experiences of religious persecution in England and the varying practices in the colonies deeply influenced the framers of the Constitution. The desire to avoid replicating the religious conflicts and intolerance they had experienced or observed led to the inclusion of the Establishment Clause in the First Amendment. The Constitutional Convention of 1787 was marked by debates about the role of religion in government. Some framers, like James Madison, were ardent proponents of religious freedom, having witnessed the detrimental effects of state-imposed religion and the benefits of religious diversity. Madison's commitment to religious liberty was evident in his drafting of the Bill of Rights, where he emphasized the need for a clear separation between church and state. The Establishment Clause was included to ensure that the new federal government would not establish an official religion or favor one faith over another. This principle was intended to protect religious diversity and prevent the kind of religious oppression that had plagued both Europe and the early American colonies. Conclusion: the Establishment Clause's prohibition of state-sponsored religion was deeply informed by the historical context of religious tyranny and intolerance in England and colonial America. The framers of the Constitution sought to create a government that would respect and protect religious freedom, drawing on their experiences of persecution and their commitment to a just and inclusive society. By enshrining this principle in the First Amendment, they aimed to safeguard against the imposition of religious orthodoxy and ensure that all individuals could freely practice their faith without fear of government interference. Everson v. Board of Education, 1947. The Supreme Court case of Everson v. Board of Education, 1947, was a landmark decision in the interpretation of the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment. This case played a crucial role in defining the principle of separation between church and state, setting a precedent that has shaped subsequent legal and constitutional interpretations. Background: the origins of Everson trace back to the post-World War II era, a time of significant growth and change in American society. The case arose in the context of a New Jersey law that provided reimbursement to parents for transportation costs incurred when sending their children to private schools, including religious schools. This law was challenged by a taxpayer named Arthur Everson, who argued that using public funds to support transportation to religious schools violated the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment. Everson contended that the New Jersey program amounted to an indirect subsidy of religious education, as it used taxpayer dollars to benefit institutions with a religious affiliation. The central question before the court was whether this financial assistance violated the constitutional separation of church and state. The Supreme Court's decision. The Supreme Court, in a 5-4 decision, upheld the New Jersey law, with Justice Hugo Black writing the majority opinion. The court ruled that the law did not violate the Establishment Clause. The reasoning behind the decision was rooted in the interpretation of the separation of church and state and the concept of the wall of separation between government and religion. Justice Black's opinion emphasized that while the First Amendment prohibits the establishment of a state religion, it does not require the government to be entirely aloof from religion. The majority opinion argued that the New Jersey law provided aid to all students, regardless of the type of school they attended, and that the assistance was for secular purposes, specifically transportation, rather than for religious instruction. The decision underscored that the Establishment Clause was intended to prevent the government from directly supporting or endorsing religion, but it did not preclude indirect aid to religious institutions if such aid was provided equitably and did not directly fund religious activities. The court's ruling acknowledged the practical necessity of providing transportation for students, irrespective of whether they attended public or private, religious or non-religious schools. The wall of separation principle. The Everson decision is often cited for its articulation of the wall of separation between church and state, a concept that has become a cornerstone of the court's Establishment Clause jurisprudence. This principle, derived from Thomas Jefferson's writings and earlier case law, suggests that the government should maintain a clear and distinct boundary between itself and religious institutions. Justice Black's opinion in Everson framed this principle in a way that has influenced numerous subsequent cases. He stated that the First Amendment erected a wall of separation that should be kept high and impregnable. However, he also acknowledged that this wall did not demand absolute separation, but rather a careful balance between governmental involvement and religious institutions. Impact and significance. Everson v. Board of Education has had a profound impact on American legal thought and the interpretation of the Establishment Clause. The case established a framework for analyzing government actions that involve religious institutions, focusing on whether such actions amount to an endorsement or support of religion. The ruling has been cited in numerous subsequent Supreme Court cases that deal with the relationship between government and religion. The principles established in Everson have guided decisions on issues ranging from public funding for religious schools to the permissibility of religious symbols in public spaces. The case reinforced the notion that while the government must avoid endorsing religion, it can provide neutral, non-religious benefits to all citizens. Ongoing debates. The Everson decision has also been the subject of ongoing debate and interpretation. Critics of the ruling argue that it has allowed for too much government entanglement with religion, citing instances where public funds and resources are used in ways that they believe blur the lines between church and state. Proponents, however, argue that the decision correctly balanced the need for religious neutrality with practical considerations of providing equitable public services. As American society continues to grapple with issues related to religion and public policy, the principles established in Everson v. Board of Education remain central to legal discussions about the extent to which government can and should interact with religious institutions. The case exemplifies the complex and evolving nature of the Establishment Clause and the ongoing challenge of maintaining a clear and fair separation between church and state in a diverse and dynamic society. Conclusion. Everson v. Board of Education, 1947, marked a pivotal moment in the interpretation of the Establishment Clause, solidifying the wall of separation between church and state. The Supreme Court's decision established important precedents for understanding the limits of government involvement with religion and continues to influence debates about religious freedom and public policy in the United States. Through its nuanced approach, the case highlighted the delicate balance required to uphold constitutional principles while addressing practical needs and societal changes. Lemon v. Kurtzman, 1970, won the Lemon test. The Supreme Court case Lemon v. Kurtzman, 1971, established a significant framework for assessing whether government actions violate the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment. This landmark decision introduced what is now known as the Lemon test, a three-pronged criteria used to evaluate the constitutionality of government involvement with religious institutions. The test plays a crucial role in determining whether such involvement adheres to the principle of separation between church and state, ensuring that government actions do not improperly endorse or support religious activities. Background of the case. The case originated from two separate lawsuits challenging the constitutionality of state laws in Pennsylvania and Rhode Island. These laws provided financial support to private religious schools for secular educational purposes. Specifically, the laws reimbursed private religious schools for teacher salaries, textbooks, and other instructional materials. In Pennsylvania, the statute known as the Non-Public Elementary and Secondary Education Act offered reimbursement to religious schools for teachers' salaries in secular subjects. Rhode Island's Compensatory Education Act similarly provided financial support for the salaries of teachers in religious schools for subjects that did not include religious instruction. These programs were challenged by taxpayers who argued that the financial support constituted an unconstitutional establishment of religion, as it involved government funding of religious institutions. The plaintiffs contended that such financial aid violated the Establishment Clause by indirectly supporting religious education. The Supreme Court's decision. In a 8-1 decision, the Supreme Court ruled that the state programs in question were unconstitutional. Justice Hugo Black, writing for the majority, articulated the need for a clearer standard to assess whether government actions align with the Establishment Clause. This led to the formulation of the Lemon Test, which the court devised to provide a consistent method for evaluating government involvement with religion. The Lemon Test. The Lemon Test consists of 3 criteria that must be met for a government action to be deemed constitutional under the Establishment Clause. The government action must have a secular legislative purpose. This criterion requires that the primary intention behind the government action be secular, rather than religious. The government must demonstrate that its action is aimed at achieving a non-religious objective, such as enhancing the general welfare or providing a public service. The primary effect of the action must neither advance nor inhibit religion. This criterion assesses whether the action has a predominantly secular effect, without promoting or discouraging religious beliefs. The government action should not result in a tangible benefit to any particular religion or religious institution, nor should it impose restrictions on religious practices. The action must not result in excessive government entanglement with religion. This criterion examines the extent of the government's involvement with religious institutions. Excessive entanglement occurs when government actions result in too much interaction, monitoring, or oversight of religious activities, which could lead to an improper fusion of church and state. In applying these criteria, the court found that the state laws in question failed to meet the Lemon Test's requirements. The programs provided direct financial assistance to religious schools, which the court deemed as advancing religion by subsidizing religious education. Additionally, the programs created a situation of excessive entanglement between government and religion, as the states would have to monitor and review the religious schools' activities to ensure compliance with secular purposes. Impact and significance. The Lemon Test established by Lemon v. Kurtzman has had a profound impact on how courts evaluate government actions involving religion. The test provides a structured approach to ensuring that government actions do not violate the Establishment Clause by promoting or endorsing religious activities. The test has been used in various cases to scrutinize the constitutionality of government programs and policies related to religious institutions. For instance, it has been applied to evaluate issues such as public funding for religious schools, government displays of religious symbols, and other forms of government support that could be perceived as endorsing religion. However, the Lemon Test has not been without controversy and criticism. Some legal scholars and judges have argued that it is too rigid and may not always adequately address the nuances of particular cases. In more recent years, the Supreme Court has moved away from the strict application of the Lemon Test in favor of other approaches that emphasize government neutrality and avoid excessive entanglement with religion. Ongoing relevance. Despite the evolving legal landscape, the Lemon Test remains a significant part of Establishment Clause jurisprudence. It represents a key effort to balance the need for governmental neutrality with the practicalities of public policy. The principles established in Lemon v. Kurtzman continue to guide discussions about the proper limits of government involvement with religious institutions, ensuring that constitutional protections against the establishment of religion are upheld. In summary, Lemon v. Kurtzman, 1971, played a crucial role in defining the legal framework for evaluating government actions involving religion. The Lemon Test, with its emphasis on secular purpose, non-advancement of religion, and avoidance of excessive entanglement, continues to shape the interpretation and application of the Establishment Clause, reflecting the ongoing challenge of maintaining a clear and fair separation between church and state. Lemon v. Kurtzman, 1971. The Lemon Test. The Supreme Court case Lemon v. Kurtzman, 1971, established a significant framework for assessing whether government actions violate the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment. This landmark decision introduced what is now known as the Lemon Test, a three-pronged criteria used to evaluate the constitutionality of government involvement with religious institutions. The test plays a crucial role in determining whether such involvement adheres to the principle of separation between church and state, ensuring that government actions do not improperly endorse or support religious activities. Background of the case. The case originated from two separate lawsuits challenging the constitutionality of state laws in Pennsylvania and Rhode Island. These laws provided financial support to private religious schools for secular educational purposes. Specifically, the laws reimbursed private religious schools for teachers' salaries, textbooks, and other instructional materials. In Pennsylvania, the statute known as the Non-Public Elementary and Secondary Education Act offered reimbursement to religious schools for teachers' salaries in secular subjects. Rhode Island's Compensatory Education Act similarly provided financial support for the salaries of teachers in religious schools for subjects that did not include religious instruction. These programs were challenged by taxpayers who argued that the financial support constituted an unconstitutional establishment of religion, as it involved government funding of religious institutions. The plaintiffs contended that such financial aid violated the Establishment Clause by indirectly supporting religious education. The Supreme Court's decision. In a 8-1 decision, the Supreme Court ruled that the state programs in question were unconstitutional. Justice Hugo Black, writing for the majority, articulated the need for a clearer standard to assess whether government actions align with the Establishment Clause. This led to the formulation of the Lemon Test, which the court devised to provide a consistent method for evaluating government involvement with religion. The Lemon Test. The Lemon Test consists of 3 criteria that must be met for a government action to be deemed constitutional under the Establishment Clause. The government action must have a secular legislative purpose. This criterion requires that the primary intention behind the government action be secular, rather than religious. The government must demonstrate that its action is aimed at achieving a non-religious objective, such as enhancing the general welfare or providing a public service. The primary effect of the action must neither advance nor inhibit religion. This criterion assesses whether the action has a predominantly secular effect, without promoting or discouraging religious beliefs. The government action should not result in a tangible benefit to any particular religion or religious institution, nor should it impose restrictions on religious practices. The action must not result in excessive government entanglement with religion. This criterion examines the extent of the government's involvement with religious institutions. Excessive entanglement occurs when government actions result in too much interaction, monitoring, or oversight of religious activities, which could lead to an improper fusion of church and state. In applying these criteria, the court found that the state laws in question failed to meet the Lemon Test's requirements. The programs provided direct financial assistance to religious schools, which the court deemed as advancing religion by subsidizing religious education. Additionally, the programs created a situation of excessive entanglement between government and religion, as the states would have to monitor and review the religious schools' activities to ensure compliance with secular purposes. Impact and significance. The Lemon Test established by Lemon v. Kurtzman has had a profound impact on how courts evaluate government actions involving religion. The test provides a structured approach to ensuring that government actions do not violate the Establishment Clause by promoting or endorsing religious activities. The test has been used in various cases to scrutinize the constitutionality of government programs and policies related to religious institutions. For instance, it has been applied to evaluate issues such as public funding for religious schools, government displays of religious symbols, and other forms of government support that could be perceived as endorsing religion. However, the Lemon Test has not been without controversy and criticism. Some legal scholars and judges have argued that it is too rigid and may not always adequately address the nuances of particular cases. In more recent years, the Supreme Court has moved away from the strict application of the Lemon Test in favor of other approaches that emphasize government neutrality and avoid excessive entanglement with religion. Ongoing relevance. Despite the evolving legal landscape, the Lemon Test remains a significant part of Establishment Clause jurisprudence. It represents a key effort to balance the need for governmental neutrality with the practicalities of public policy. The principles established in Lemon v. Kurtzman continue to guide discussions about the proper limits of government involvement with religious institutions, ensuring that constitutional protections against the establishment of religion are upheld. In summary, Lemon v. Kurtzman, 1971, played a crucial role in defining the legal framework for evaluating government actions involving religion. The Lemon Test, with its emphasis on secular purpose, non-advancement of religion, and avoidance of excessive entanglement, continues to shape the interpretation and application of the Establishment Clause, reflecting the ongoing challenge of maintaining a clear and fair separation between church and state. Freedom of religion. The Free Exercise Clause. The Free Exercise Clause, a fundamental component of the First Amendment, protects an individual's right to practice their religion without governmental interference. This clause, which states that Congress shall make no law prohibiting the free exercise of religion, serves as a critical safeguard for religious liberty in the United States. It ensures that individuals can worship freely and practice their faith without fear of coercion or restriction from the government. Historical context. The origins of the Free Exercise Clause can be traced back to the religious conflicts and persecutions that influenced the founding of America. Many of the early settlers in the colonies sought refuge from religious persecution in Europe, where state-sponsored religions and anti-dissent laws severely restricted religious freedoms. The experience of these early settlers underscored the need for a constitutional guarantee of religious freedom. The early American colonies varied widely in their approach to religious practice. Some colonies, such as Massachusetts, established state religions and enforced strict religious conformity, while others, like Rhode Island and Pennsylvania, were founded on principles of religious tolerance and freedom. These varying practices highlighted the importance of protecting religious freedoms in a new, unified nation. Supreme Court interpretations. The Supreme Court has played a crucial role in interpreting the Free Exercise Clause, establishing key precedents that define the scope of religious freedom. Over time, the court has addressed various issues related to the free exercise of religion, balancing individual rights with governmental interests. Early cases. Early Supreme Court decisions focused on the basic protection of religious practices from government interference. In Reynolds v. United States 1878, the court addressed the issue of whether a religious practice could be exempt from a generally applicable law. The case involved a Mormon man who challenged federal laws against polygamy, arguing that his religious beliefs protected his right to practice polygamy. The court ruled that while religious beliefs are protected, religious practices that conflict with criminal laws could be regulated by the government. This decision established the principle that the Free Exercise Clause does not provide an absolute exemption from laws that are neutral and generally applicable. Modern interpretations. In more recent decades, the Supreme Court has refined its approach to the Free Exercise Clause, addressing complex issues involving religious practices and governmental regulations. A landmark case in this context is Employment Division v. Smith, 1990, which involved two individuals who were fired from their jobs for using peyote, a hallucinogenic drug, as part of their religious ceremonies. The Supreme Court ruled that the state could deny unemployment benefits to these individuals because the law banning peyote was a neutral, generally applicable law that did not specifically target religious practices. This decision sparked significant debate and led to the passage of the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, RFRA, in 1993, which sought to restore stronger protections for religious practices. Another important case is Burwell v. Hobby Lobby Stores Incorporated, 2014, where the Supreme Court addressed the issue of whether a for-profit corporation could be exempt from providing contraceptive coverage under the Affordable Care Act due to religious objections. The court ruled that closely held corporations could be exempt from certain mandates if it imposed a substantial burden on their religious beliefs. This decision reinforced the idea that religious freedom protections extend to corporations, provided they have a significant religious character. Balancing religious freedom with other interests. The Free Exercise Clause protects individual religious practices, but does not permit absolute freedom from all governmental regulations. The Supreme Court has consistently sought to balance the protection of religious exercise with other legitimate governmental interests, such as public health and safety. This balancing act involves assessing whether government actions are neutral and generally applicable or whether they specifically target religious practices. Exemptions and accommodations. The court has recognized that in some cases, exemptions or accommodations may be warranted to ensure that religious freedoms are not unduly burdened. For instance, the court has upheld the right of religious groups to receive accommodations for practices such as Sabbath observance or dietary restrictions. However, it also examines whether such accommodations impose undue burdens on governmental operations or infringe on the rights of others. Ongoing challenges. The Free Exercise Clause continues to be a source of legal and social debate as new issues arise involving religious freedoms. Contemporary cases often involve conflicts between individual religious practices and government regulations, such as those related to healthcare, employment, and education. The challenge remains to ensure that religious freedoms are upheld while addressing the needs and rights of a diverse society. Conclusion. The Free Exercise Clause is a vital component of the First Amendment, safeguarding an individual's right to practice their religion without governmental interference. Through its historical context and Supreme Court interpretations, the clause has evolved to address complex issues of religious freedom and governmental regulation. While protecting the right to religious practice, the courts continue to balance this freedom with other societal interests, reflecting the ongoing challenge of maintaining a fair and equitable approach to religious liberty in a diverse and dynamic nation. Challenges and complexities. The Free Exercise Clause of the First Amendment, while fundamental in protecting religious liberty, presents significant challenges and complexities in its application. Balancing the right to practice religion freely with the government's role in protecting societal interests often leads to intricate legal cases. Furthermore, determining when religious accommodations cross the line into establishment can complicate judicial decisions. These issues underscore the delicate interplay between safeguarding individual religious freedoms and maintaining a neutral, secular government. Balancing act. One of the central challenges in applying the Free Exercise Clause is balancing religious freedom with the government's role in protecting other societal interests. This balancing act often involves weighing individual rights against the needs and rights of the broader community. Conflicting interests. Cases that involve religious practices can create conflicts with other important government interests, such as public health, safety, and equality. For example, laws designed to protect public health may sometimes conflict with religious practices. A notable example is Employment Division v. Smith, 1990, where the Supreme Court ruled that a state could deny unemployment benefits to individuals who were fired for using peyote in a religious ceremony, as the law prohibiting peyote was a neutral, generally applicable regulation. This case highlighted the difficulty of reconciling religious practices with laws that serve broader societal purposes. Workplace and education. Conflicts also arise in the workplace and educational settings, where religious practices might intersect with employment policies or educational requirements. Cases such as Burwell v. Hobby Lobby Stores Incorporated, 2014, demonstrate how religious objections can conflict with federal regulations, such as the mandate to provide contraceptive coverage under the Affordable Care Act. The Supreme Court's decision in this case allowed closely held corporations to be exempt from certain mandates based on religious beliefs, illustrating the complexities involved in balancing individual religious freedoms with regulatory requirements. Accommodations versus establishment. Another significant challenge is distinguishing between legitimate accommodations for religious practices and actions that might constitute an establishment of religion. Courts must carefully navigate these issues to ensure that religious accommodations do not inadvertently lead to government endorsement or support of religion. Defining accommodation. Religious accommodations refer to adjustments or exemptions provided to individuals or groups to allow them to practice their faith without undue burden. For example, allowing employees to take time off for religious observances or permitting students to wear religious attire in schools are generally seen as appropriate accommodations. These measures are intended to support religious freedom without compromising the neutrality of the government. Establishment concerns. However, the line between accommodation and establishment can be blurry. Courts must ensure that accommodations do not lead to government endorsement or favoritism towards specific religions. A significant concern is that overly broad accommodations might be perceived as an endorsement of religious practices, which could violate the Establishment Clause. For instance, if a government agency were to provide substantial funding to religious organizations, it could raise concerns about whether such support effectively establishes or endorses a particular religion. Judicial scrutiny. To address these issues, courts apply rigorous scrutiny to determine whether government actions cross the line into establishment. The Lemon Test, established in Lemon v. Kurtzman, 1971, remains one of the key tools used to assess whether government actions have a secular purpose, avoid advancing or inhibiting religion, and do not result in excessive entanglement with religion. This framework helps ensure that while religious accommodations are permissible, they do not inadvertently result in an unconstitutional establishment of religion. Ongoing debates. The challenges and complexities associated with the Free Exercise Clause continue to provoke debate and legal scrutiny. As society evolves and new issues arise, such as those involving technological advancements or changes in social norms, the balance between religious freedoms and governmental interests remains a dynamic and contentious area of law. Emerging issues. New challenges often involve modern contexts that were not anticipated by the framers of the Constitution. For example, the rise of religious-based businesses, technological advancements affecting religious practices, and evolving social attitudes toward religion introduce fresh dilemmas for courts to address. These emerging issues require careful consideration to ensure that both individual religious freedoms and societal interests are appropriately balanced. Conclusion. The Free Exercise Clause presents significant challenges in balancing religious freedom with the government's role in protecting societal interests. The intricate legal cases that arise from these challenges highlight the complexity of maintaining a fair and neutral approach to religious liberty. Distinguishing between appropriate religious accommodations and actions that may constitute an establishment of religion requires careful judicial scrutiny. As new issues and contexts emerge, the ongoing task of balancing these interests remains a critical aspect of constitutional interpretation and application, reflecting the evolving nature of religious freedom in American society. The Free Exercise Clause of the First Amendment, while central to protecting religious liberty, presents significant challenges and complexities in its application. Balancing the right to practice religion freely with the government's role in safeguarding other societal interests often leads to intricate legal cases. Additionally, determining when religious accommodations cross the line into establishment issues complicates judicial decisions, underscoring the delicate balance between individual religious freedoms and maintaining a secular government. Balancing act. One of the primary challenges in applying the Free Exercise Clause is balancing religious freedom with other government interests, such as public health and safety. This balancing act requires careful consideration of individual rights against broader societal needs. Conflicting interests. Cases involving religious practices often conflict with important government interests. For instance, laws aimed at protecting public health may clash with religious practices. A notable example is Employment Division v. Smith, 1990, where the Supreme Court ruled that a state could deny unemployment benefits to individuals fired for using peyote in religious ceremonies. The court found that the law prohibiting peyote was a neutral, generally applicable regulation, even though it impacted a religious practice. This case illustrates the difficulty of reconciling religious practices with laws designed to serve broader societal purposes. Workplace and education. Conflicts also arise in workplaces and educational settings, where religious practices might intersect with policies or requirements. Burwell v. Hobby Lobby Stores Incorporated, 2014, demonstrates how religious objections can conflict with federal regulations, such as the mandate to provide contraceptive coverage under the Affordable Care Act. The Supreme Court's decision allowed closely held corporations to be exempt from certain mandates based on religious beliefs, showing the complexities of balancing individual religious freedoms with regulatory requirements. Accommodations versus establishment. Another challenge is distinguishing between valid accommodations for religious practices and actions that may constitute an establishment of religion. Courts must navigate these issues to ensure that accommodations do not lead to government endorsement or support of religion. Defining accommodation. Religious accommodations involve adjustments or exemptions that allow individuals or groups to practice their faith without undue burden. Examples include allowing employees time off for religious observances or permitting students to wear religious attire in schools. These accommodations are intended to support religious freedom while maintaining governmental neutrality. Establishment concerns. The line between accommodation and establishment can be blurry. Courts must ensure that accommodations do not result in government endorsement or favoritism toward specific religions. A key concern is that broad accommodations might be perceived as endorsing religious practices, potentially violating the Establishment Clause. For instance, substantial government funding to religious organizations could raise concerns about whether such support effectively establishes or endorses religion. Judicial scrutiny. To address these issues, courts apply rigorous scrutiny to determine if government actions cross into establishment territory. The Lemon Test, established in Lemon v. Kurtzman, 1971, is a key tool used to assess whether government actions have a secular purpose, avoid advancing or inhibiting religion, and do not result in excessive entanglement with religion. This framework ensures that while religious accommodations are permissible, they do not inadvertently result in unconstitutional establishment of religion. Ongoing debates. The challenges related to the Free Exercise Clause continue to provoke debate and legal scrutiny. As society evolves, new issues such as technological advancements and changing social norms introduce fresh dilemmas for the courts. These emerging issues require careful consideration to balance individual religious freedoms with societal interests. Emerging issues. Modern contexts that were not anticipated by the framers of the Constitution, such as religious-based businesses or technological impacts on religious practices, present new challenges. Evolving social attitudes toward religion also introduce complexities. Courts must navigate these emerging issues to ensure both religious freedoms and societal interests are appropriately balanced. Conclusion. The Free Exercise Clause presents significant challenges in balancing religious freedom with the government's role in protecting societal interests. The legal complexities that arise from these challenges highlight the difficulty of maintaining a fair and neutral approach to religious liberty. Distinguishing between appropriate religious accommodations and actions that may constitute an establishment of religion requires careful judicial scrutiny. As new issues and contexts emerge, the task of balancing these interests remains a critical aspect of constitutional interpretation and application, reflecting the evolving nature of religious freedom in American society. Evolving interpretations. The interpretation of religious freedom under the First Amendment has evolved significantly over time, reflecting shifts in judicial attitudes and societal values. Key Supreme Court cases such as Minersville School District v. Gobitis, 1940, and West Virginia State Board of Education v. Barnett, 1943, illustrate this evolution and demonstrate how interpretations of religious freedom can change based on context and judicial perspective. Minersville School District v. Gobitis, 1940. In Minersville School District v. Gobitis, 1940, the Supreme Court addressed a case involving two Jehovah's Witness students who refused to salute the American flag in public school due to their religious beliefs. The school district required students to participate in the flag salute, and the Gobitis siblings were expelled for noncompliance. The court ruled against the students, upholding the school's requirement as a legitimate exercise of state authority to promote national unity and civic values. Decision rationale. The decision in Gobitis was grounded in the belief that national unity and patriotism could outweigh individual religious objections in public education settings. The majority opinion emphasized the importance of a unified national identity and argued that the flag salute was a secular activity that did not infringe upon religious freedom. This ruling reflected a broader view that religious practices could be subordinated to governmental interests in promoting social cohesion. Implications. The Gobitis decision was controversial and sparked significant debate about the balance between religious freedoms and national interests. Critics argued that the ruling ignored the fundamental right of individuals to practice their religion without government interference. The case highlighted the tensions between individual religious freedoms and perceived collective values in a democratic society. West Virginia State Board of Education v. Barnett, 1943. Just a few years later, the Supreme Court revisited the issue in West Virginia State Board of Education v. Barnett, 1943, which involved the same question of whether students could be compelled to salute the flag. However, in this case, the court reversed its earlier decision in Gobitis and ruled in favor of the students, affirming their right to refuse the flag salute based on their religious beliefs. Decision rationale. The Barnett decision marked a significant shift in the court's approach to religious freedom. The court's ruling emphasized the protection of individual freedoms against government mandates that infringe upon personal beliefs. The majority opinion in Barnett articulated a strong defense of free expression, asserting that the government could not compel individuals to express beliefs contrary to their own. The decision underscored the principle that individual rights to religious expression should be upheld, even in the face of conflicting governmental interests. Implications. The reversal in Barnett demonstrated a more robust commitment to protecting religious and expressive freedoms. The decision reflected a broader recognition of individual rights and set a precedent for future cases involving religious expression and governmental authority. Barnett has been cited in numerous subsequent rulings to reinforce the protection of personal beliefs and the limits of government power in matters of religious and expressive freedom. Evolving nature of religious freedom jurisprudence. These cases illustrate the evolving nature of religious freedom jurisprudence in the United States. The shift from the Gobitis decision to the Barnett ruling highlights how judicial interpretations of religious freedom can change over time based on evolving social attitudes and legal principles. Societal and legal shifts. The evolution from Gobitis to Barnett reflects broader societal and legal shifts toward a more inclusive understanding of individual rights. During the 1940s, the national context and the court's approach to religious freedom were influenced by the wartime climate and prevailing views on national unity. However, as the country's values evolved, the court's interpretation also adapted to more robust protections for individual freedoms. Ongoing relevance. The principles established in Barnett continue to influence contemporary discussions on religious freedom and expressive rights. The case underscores the importance of protecting individual rights against government mandates and serves as a foundation for evaluating the boundaries of governmental authority in relation to personal beliefs. The evolving interpretations of religious freedom highlight the dynamic nature of constitutional law and its responsiveness to changing societal values and legal principles. Conclusion. The evolution of religious freedom jurisprudence, as exemplified by Minersville School District v. Gobitis and West Virginia State Board of Education v. Barnett, illustrates how judicial interpretations of the First Amendment can shift over time. These cases reflect the ongoing balance between protecting individual religious freedoms and addressing governmental interests. As societal values and legal perspectives continue to evolve, the interpretation of religious freedom will likely remain a dynamic and responsive aspect of constitutional law. Religion and public education. Public schools face a complex challenge in navigating the line between teaching about religion and promoting religious beliefs. The First Amendment's Establishment Clause mandates that the government, including public schools, must maintain neutrality regarding religion. This means that while schools can educate students about religion in a neutral, academic manner, they must avoid endorsing or promoting any particular religious belief. Teaching about religion. Public schools are permitted to include instruction about religion as part of the broader curriculum, provided it is done in a secular and educational context. This might include teaching about the role of religion in history, literature, or cultural studies. For instance, students might learn about the impact of various religions on historical events, the influence of religious texts on literature, or the diversity of religious beliefs around the world. Such instruction aims to provide students with a comprehensive understanding of different cultures and belief systems, contributing to a well-rounded education. Academic approach. When religion is taught in public schools, it must be approached academically, without promoting or endorsing any specific religious viewpoint. This means presenting religious beliefs and practices in a neutral and objective manner, focusing on their historical, cultural, and sociological aspects rather than advocating for or against any particular faith. The goal is to inform students about religion's role in shaping societies and cultures, not to encourage religious participation or conversion. Avoiding religious promotion. Public schools must avoid any actions that could be perceived as promoting religious beliefs. This includes not leading prayers, displaying religious symbols in a way that might suggest endorsement, or conducting religious ceremonies during school hours. The courts have consistently ruled against practices that blur the line between education and religious promotion, as seen in cases like Engel v. Vitale, 1962, where the Supreme Court ruled that official school-sponsored prayer violated the Establishment Clause. Neutral environment. To maintain a neutral environment, public schools often implement policies that ensure religious neutrality in school activities. This might involve avoiding religious content in official ceremonies or providing students with opportunities to express their religious beliefs outside of instructional time, such as through student-led religious clubs. These measures help ensure that while students can learn about and discuss religion, the school environment remains free from religious endorsement. Conclusion. Public schools navigate a delicate balance in providing education about religion while adhering to constitutional principles of neutrality. By focusing on religious instruction from an academic perspective and avoiding religious promotion, schools aim to respect the diverse beliefs of their students and uphold the First Amendment's requirement for separation of church and state.